Thanks for tuning in to Unbreakable with Chris Chamasiros. I talk about politics, sports, and entertainment to keep you well-rounded what's going on around the world. If you don't like hearing the truth, definitely don't tune into this channel. So let's get started today. You know, Stephen A. Smith is still in full denial mode why Shedeur Sanders slipped in the draft. No matter how much evidence gets presented to Stephen A. Smith, he just doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want to hear the truth. I don't understand why he keeps spinning this narrative that Deion Sanders' big mouth and Shedeur Sanders' poor game tape had nothing to do with Shedeur Sanders slipping to the fifth round. And let's not forget about his horrible interviews. If I am the New York Giants at this point, I release the interviews between them and Shedeur, which Shedeur showed up not prepared, knowing the plays, and when the coach yelled at him, he got an attitude. It's not a false report. And Stephen A. Smith, it doesn't matter how much evidence you present him with, he will just keep spinning this narrative that the NFL of all places, the NFL, it's like literally the definition of colorblind, that the NFL is racist and that the NFL doesn't like confident black men. Stephen A. Smith is still on this ridiculous angle. This entire situation is Deion Sanders' fault. Because remember, the Cleveland Browns had the second overall pick in the draft. And the entire time, Deion Sanders is clowning the Cleveland Browns, saying, my son will never play for the Browns. And you know what? If I'm the Browns, even if I wanted to take Shedeur, I'd say, no thanks. If he's there later in the rounds, we'll grab him. And another thing, Deion Sanders, he fired the agent. Shedeur didn't have an agent. He was the agent. So his greed and his ego and the way that he acts cost his son between $20 and $50 million. Because Deion does this all the time. Deion is constantly, football is a team game. We all know that. Team game. And every time you hear Deion Sanders talk about his time in the NFL, he always says, like, the coach is going to tell me what to do. I told him it was like this, and it's going to be like this, and y'all paying me too much, and I'm doing it like that. He's uncoachable. And not only is he uncoachable, he's unbearable to deal with in a team game because he just can't listen to what anybody else's opinion is. The only thing that I'll agree with Stephen A. Smith about is this. When he says a lot of teams just didn't want to deal with Deion, yeah, that absolutely. Maybe Deion should take a page out of Jerry Rice's book, the way he deals with his son, and takes a step back and lets his hard work speak for itself. Deion wants to be the agent, the coach, the dad, everybody, and he thinks he's going to tell NFL teams the way things are going to be. Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders, they act like this is college recruiting. Shedeur was acting like he was being recruited by colleges. And Deion was acting like he was doing NFL teams a favor by letting them draft his son. The attitude, the arrogance, that's what cost Deion Sanders, not racism. So let's jump into this video.
Good day. Welcome back to First Take. Deion Sanders opened up on Monday about reports that his son, Shedeur Sanders, went into pre-draft meetings unprepared and unprofessional. The Colorado head coach and former NFL star who coached his son through college said he was hurt by the reports around Shedeur's slide into the fifth round of the NFL draft to the Cleveland Browns. Here's Prime with more.
When you sit up there and say something like he went in a meeting unprepared, like, dude, Shedeur Sanders, who's had 6 different coordinators, who has still functioned.
Okay, hold on. Shedeur Sanders has been coached by his fathers in his entire life. And Shedeur Sanders had 6 different offensive coordinators. Well, whose fault is that, Deion? You're the coach.
And went up, leveled up every time we brought somebody new in. And you're going to tell me
every situation.
You're going to tell me he had on headphones. Shedeur, anybody know my son, understand he's a professional. Like, he's going to go into a meeting with headphones on. Like, y'all, come on, man.
All right, Booger McFarland joining the show. Boog, great to have you with us. And I want to start with you here. But what's your reaction to what Coach Prime just had to say?
Well, I think it's the correct reaction. I think it's a coach, it's a father defending his son, understanding what he heard, understanding that the Sanders name has kind of been slandered, especially during the pre-draft process, and everybody's trying to figure out.
the Sanders name has been slandered. Well, who does Deion have to blame for that? Himself, because of his behavior. That's why. And then he knows that Shedeur, his first year at Colorado, lost the last 5 or 6 games of the season. Before the bowl game with BYU didn't have one player drafted to the NFL. He takes his team to the strip club for a day or two before the game. The team shows up, they crap the bed, he throws a pick, he fumbles the ball, gets picked up by BYU. BYU absolutely demolished the Colorado Buffaloes. And that's Shedeur Sanders' final piece of work going into the NFL. And everybody wants to say that the Sanders are being slandered.
Post-draft, why Shedeur Sanders slid. Here's what I'll say, though. I think some of this stuff wasn't made up. I covered the draft for ESPN. I'm sitting on the desk. It's Shefty, it's Mel, it's me, it's Lewis. I heard some of the same things that Deion Sanders is talking about. And S.A. and Cantor, you know this, we all have relationships. We all have people who tell us information that help us prepare to do our job. I heard some of the same things. Some of these things weren't necessarily made up, at least I don't think, from the people that I trust who told me these things. And so I think 2 things can be true here. I think the information that was out on Shedeur Sanders came from a lot of people that a lot of people trust and people think that are credible. I also think that Deion can't believe and doesn't believe that his son would do some of the things. I don't know. I wasn't in those meetings. I just know covering this draft, trying to figure out why this young man slid from we all thought he was going to be at worst a late first round pick, maybe early second, to the 5th round. I think we're all trying to figure out and piece together why that happened. But
Here, I'll tell you why he slid. Because he holds onto the ball too long. He drifts out of the pocket. He's not a good leader. It's known, it's been reported what he did before the bowl game. That's a good leader. See, a real leader tells the team, let's focus, let's get a win, and then we'll celebrate. Not let's celebrate and then play a football game. Let's look at Shedeur's resume also. He didn't play the best competition by far. In the Big 12 where he played, they only had 7 defensive players drafted in the entire Big 12 to the NFL. Georgia has that on 1 defense. So he didn't play the best competition, and he totally crapped the bed in the most important games, and everybody just can't see. ESPN started the narrative that Shedeur Sanders should be a first-round pick. And then when nobody believed their lie, there's something wrong with you, and you're a racist.
I got no problem with Deion defending his son because we all got kids. And if our kids were being slandered or some of the things that said about Shedeur were being said, we would defend them publicly also. Now, probably.
Okay, Booger, let me ask you a question. If you knew your son was wrong, are you going to keep the lie going? Because that's what Deion's doing. If I'm the Giants, I release the tapes. Call Deion's bluff. Release the interview tapes. And then I want to see Deion Sanders. Nobody ask Deion Sanders the tough questions. They don't ask him about the BYU game. They don't ask him about Shedeur's first year at Colorado where they finished the season by losing 6 games in a row. They don't ask him about the strip club. And then Deion keeps the lie going. So I want the Giants to release the tapes, and then we can ask Deion, well, Deion, there you go. So who are you going to blame now?
I'm going to ask my kid to tell me the truth. But publicly, I'm going to make sure I defend his name, our family's name, and everything that went on. And so I understand what Deion is doing, and I probably would have done the same thing. But me, nor you, nor Deion was in those meetings, and I think we have to take the word. He's got to take the word of his son, and I think the insiders, the people that have the information that are sharing this information at us, if you trust them, you have to take their word for it also.
Booger, I completely agree with you. Here's what I will say, and this is not specific to Shedeur Sanders, but I know that NFL teams will slander a player's name when it comes to the pre-draft process to give themselves cover if, in fact, that player ends up panning out.
That's another lie. No, they slander players' first-round picks because they want the player to slip later in the round, still in the first round. So if, let's say they know a guy's going to go at 4, they might make up a lie to try to get him to fall to them at like pick 25. Teams don't slander a guy and then he drops to the 5th. That's just nothing but a lie. They play that game with guaranteed first-round picks. They did it to Warren Sapp. They do it to specific guys. They did it to Dan Marino. Shedeur was never guaranteed to be a first-round pick. The only people that made up that narrative were Stephen A. Smith the Clown, racist Ryan Clark, and woke ESPN, and Deion Sanders, because none of the real scouts had Shedeur Sanders as a first-round pick.
and becomes a viable starting option, especially at the quarterback position, which is one that's at a premium in today's game. Now, if the reports on how Shedeur handled those meetings are true, then that would be counter to anything we've seen from Shedeur Sanders in terms of how he's conducted himself across a couple of different stops in college football from Jackson State to Colorado. And for somebody that's grown up in the limelight, you knew that being Deion Sanders' son is going to come along with a different degree of scrutiny. So, again, I'm not calling anybody out their name or calling anybody out a liar, but I will say it's just hard for me to believe that he would be, quote, unprofessional when it comes to the biggest job interview of his career. I do believe a part of why he slid in the draft is because NFL executives, coaches alike, have tried to assign personality traits to Shedeur that they saw in Deion as a player. We can't get past Deion Sanders and the combine interview or.
So he's blaming everybody else for Shedeur's behavior in these interviews. Shedeur, he even went on TV and said, if NFL teams don't know who I am, I don't need y'all. Y'all need me. Yeah, great attitude during a job interview. I mean, take some responsibility. Take some accountability for your behavior. Oh, yeah, they're trying to assign Shedeur Deion's personality, and they're just making up, like, how do you have a job? How do you have a job? Because by all reports, we know that Shedeur went into these meetings and didn't act professional.
The interview that didn't happen with the New York Giants, where he asked them where they were going to draft, and he said they're going to be picking too late, so he blew off the interview. There are certain things in terms of how Deion conducted himself as a player that people are trying to assign from a personality standpoint to Shedeur Sanders, and I think that's incredibly unfair to the young man.
Let's go a little deeper here. You guys are champions. You guys both played in the National Football League. Let's get personal.
Oh, here we go.
Deion Sanders enough. Has anybody ever been in a position to say that Deion Sanders was a liar? Ever. We've all talked about him for years. Have you run across?
Oh, so Deion never lies. That's what you're saying, Stephen A. Smith? He never tells a lie. Well, he's lying through his teeth about this situation. That's for sure. The Giants need to release the tape so we can all ask Deion the tough questions, because obviously Stephen A. Smith, the clown, he'll never ask Deion any tough questions. What happened in the BYU bowl game? Why did Shedeur take the team to a strip club? How come you said Shedeur will never play for the Cleveland Browns, Deion? Nobody will ask Deion the tough questions. Hey, I noticed Shedeur hasn't played against any NFL competition. And he still only won, and he still lost 4 or 5 games his second season. His first year, he lost 5 or 6 games in a row to end the season. Nobody asked him the tough questions. Nobody.
Anybody that said Deion Sanders said one thing to your face and said something else behind your back.
Oh, my God.
That's not who that man is.
Okay.
And so when he comes out and he says something about his son, there is no question he has spoken to his son. Right. There is no question that Deion Sanders.
Oh, because Shedeur can't lie. Like, you're not God. Deion is not God. His kids are not God. Nobody's perfect. People lie all the time. Oh, he's a godly man. He never lies. Deion is so full of shit with Shedeur, this whole entire process. All he's done is lie during this entire process. And Deion keeps the lie going.
Prepped his son for those interviews. There is no question. I mean, the brother threw for over 4,000 yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, okay? Completing 74% of his passes, so we knew he could play. 5 quarterbacks were taken ahead of him.
I got to stop it again. Played against guys that are not going to the league. No players got drafted to the NFL when Shedeur played them. If you play in the SEC, you would literally play Georgia and Alabama. And between those two teams, they'd probably have 19 defensive players drafted to the NFL. And the guys on the bench are also going to the NFL. Those are not the type of teams that Shedeur played in college.
He entered after the season was over, and I know there's a window where you get to evaluate these guys once the NFL season is over, and you can lock in and zero in and stuff like that. Even though with a multi-billion-dollar establishment, it's hard for me to imagine that you can't have guys that are specifically designated to do evaluation while the rest of the team is preparing, for the playoffs and beyond, stuff like that. But that's neither here nor there. Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shaw, Jalen Milroe, Dylan Gabriel, all picked before Shedeur Sanders. He was projected to be a first-round pick. He was drafted 144th overall in the 5th round. 5 quarterbacks were taken.
And every single one of those quarterbacks played against better competition than Shedeur Sanders. And they all had better numbers. They played better competition and had better numbers. Shedeur played weaker competition. His numbers were similar, but he didn't face NFL defenses on a weekly basis. If Shedeur Sanders played in the SEC, his 2 years at Colorado, he probably would have won a total of 4 to 5 games.
Ahead of him. We all know this was about Deion. Now we have to get to what the real crux of the situation is. Deion, as I told y'all, was devastated. When I came on the airwaves and talked about how devastated he was, and Molly knows this, I had not spoken to him at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken to him since because he called me to thank me for being accurate on what I was saying about the level of devastation that he had felt. Because it was a painstakingly thing for him to endure, to watch his son.
And who caused that pain? Deion's big mouth caused that pain. You're acting like he's the victim here, and all these people somehow did Deion and his kid wrong. Again, no accountability whatsoever for his big mouth and his behavior. It's everybody else's fault.
Plummet, knowing it wasn't because of his ability. So if my son comes on this particular team, if this team drafts him, we might have to deal with Deion. Because if Deion ain't satisfied with how we're doing, who knows? Oh, by the way, Deion is showing himself to be a hell of a coach on the collegiate level. What if people start clamoring for him to be the head coach because we ain't doing what they think we should do?
Oh, I got to stop it. Deion's a hell of a coach on the collegiate level. What bowl game is he? He hasn't even won a bowl game one time. Not once has Deion Sanders won a bowl game, ever. Now, Stephen A. Smith wants you to think that he's better than Nick Saban at Alabama, and he's transforming college football. He was 8-4 last year and got blown out in the bowl game against BYU. The year before, they lost 6 games in a row. Oh, yeah, he's just doing such magnificent work on the college level.
Now that we got his son here on this franchise, you had all of that stuff. I know of owners who went to their personnel.
No, he doesn't.
In the draft room. You're not drafting him.
Lies.
That's what I was told. And I've been a reporter for 30 years. That's what I was told.
He's so full of shit, this guy. He's such a liar.
So
if he knew that and he knew if somebody actually said that, he would have blew the owner up. The way he is, how emotional he is, what a liar he is on a daily basis, how he race baits all the time. If he knew that, he would say the owner's name. He's lying.
I'm looking at all of these things and I'm saying to myself, of course I believe Deion. Is there culpability on the part of Deion Sanders? Yes. Because you don't go on national television and tell the world your son's going to listen to you. By the way, you know what? I don't give a damn what the NFL team, if it ain't the right situation, we ain't going to go for it. Because those kind of things can come back to haunt you.
Really? So you just admitted it. So why would the Cleveland Browns draft him at number 2 overall if Deion is clowning them the whole time? 5 quarterbacks got taken ahead of him. There's only so many quarterback slots. You just admitted that. So how could you still go with this angle that's the evil old white racist owner in the background making Shedeur Sanders doesn't get drafted high? All of a sudden, the NFL of all places doesn't like confident black men. Like, how can you say that with a straight face? The NFL doesn't like confident black men. You can really say that with a straight face. Oh, let's not forget the gold chain. All right.
And I think that if Deion had an opportunity upon reflection, he would do things a little differently himself in terms of how outspoken he was leading into the draft. And Shedeur Sanders obviously said himself there may have been things he would have done differently. But that does not.
Okay, so he just admitted that Deion messed up the draft process with his big mouth, firing the agent. He said Shedeur admitted he would do things differently also. Really? Shedeur's referring to the interviews. So you're admitting that it's their fault, and then somehow you're still trying to deflect and blame the old evil white man, the owner.
Not mean that Deion is not telling the truth when he says
Okay.
there's no way in
All
hell
right.
my son walked into an interview like that. Once again, it's a nugget of intel where you see people trying to stain you intentionally
Oh, yeah.
to put a reflection upon you and your son because of their
Booger's
feelings
not buying it.
about Deion Sanders. Now, he may have some culpability in that, but it doesn't make it right what's happening to Shedeur Sanders.
So they sabotage themselves with their big mouths and actions, but somehow that's not right. It's not right. It's not fair. Happens to people all the time when they go for a job interview. They act like a fool, they get treated like a fool. But now the world's supposed to stop. Now we got to redo the draft process. Now the evil white owners have to be fired and answer and pay. Look at his face. He is not buying this crap. Because this is what Stephen A. Smith does. He's a walking contradiction because he stands for absolutely nothing.
That brother can play. And I
Here we
think
go with the
he's going to
brother
show
thing.
that he can play on the NFL level. But most importantly than that, he has been a model of professionalism throughout his collegiate career. And for these kind of
A model of professionalism through his collegiate career. He took his team to a strip club before the biggest game of his life, a bowl game. The Buffaloes get absolutely blown out of the building. He takes the whole team with him. They all play poorly. He does the flashing of the watch to the crowd. And then when people scream at him, he can't understand why. Yeah, just such professionalism.
of things to stain him on a personal level, to me, it just shows why so many athletes should be turned off by the process. Why go through interviews and things of that nature if you're not going to tell the truth about me?
This man, he's just straight evil. So now he's encouraging other athletes not to participate in team meetings when they're about to get drafted, the biggest day of their life. And this effing idiot is indicating, why cooperate? Why go? Look what they did to Shedeur. After he just got done saying Deion and Shedeur's big mouths and their behavior caused the drop. Now he's encouraging specifically other young black men not to participate in the biggest job interview of their lives. This is why he's a piece of garbage.
Why do that? That's a shame.
S.A., I agree with a lot of the things you say, but here's what I would ask you. You just mentioned that you know of owners that went in their personnel room and said, we're not
Lies.
drafting
At least
him
one.
because of Deion. So you have your sources. You have your people
Yes.
that you have your
He doesn't have to expose his source. If there was the owner that actually did that, he would say the owner's name. He's a liar. That's all he does is lie.
people that you know, just like we all do. So how do we decipher when we have our people that we trust and the insiders have the people they trust and they're being told some of this same information? This stuff wasn't made up, in my opinion. Like, there are people that have openly talked about the pre-draft process and why Shedeur Sanders, who was a Heisman Trophy candidate, who I thought should have been a first-round pick, that the NFL did not see him the same way. So some of this stuff that we've heard may have been sensationalized, but I don't know if it was made up. And so I have a hard time saying, you know what? I'm going to pick and choose what I believe. I think the NFL teams in the pre-draft process had to take a look at all the information that they heard, or take a look at all the information that they found and make a judgment based on what they knew.
I'm going to tell you exactly what happens. When you're not a sure lock, like one of the Mannings or the next Manning that's coming out in the NFL draft, half the room is split and divided. If Shedeur would have interviewed properly and professionally, instead of listening to his dad, he would have went in the first round. So it's 50-50. He comes in, he has an attitude, he does all the dumb stuff, he's not prepared. The room shifts, and now he drops. And now it's everybody else's fault.
Like, that's the only thing I would push back to you on.
Well, the only thing that I would come back with you is that we can compartmentalize with the word sensationalism and differentiate that, or sensationalism or embellishment, and differentiate that from a lie. Fair enough. But my point is, if you're embellishing to make somebody look even worse, then essentially, in my eyes, that's a lie. Now, again, we don't have to play with
A big word salad for not taking responsibility. Deion has no one to blame but himself. He's just an effing. I cannot stand Stephen A. Smith. Whenever I hear people say he should run for president, this is the same idiot that wants you to believe that the NFL of all places is racist against confident black men. Let that sink in.
with those words right now. I get where you're coming from. The flip side to it, however, is this. If we've seen a Baker Mayfield who came into the National Football League with some troubles. We've seen a Ryan Leaf who came into the league, with question marks about his character at the time or your temperament.
He's mentioning them because they're white, so he's trying to say that there's indifference. But here's the difference. Ryan Leaf and Baker Mayfield, if you look at their college resume, it was off the charts, and the competition they played was elite to get to the NFL, unlike Shedeur Sanders. But hey, let's leave that part out, right? Right, Stephen A. Smith?
Et cetera, et cetera. And he was the number 2 pick overall. I'm sure if we scour numerous NFL drafts, we'll see people who have dropped or who walked into a draft and they didn't have a pristine reputation. What we did not see was a quarterback projected to be one of the top 2 quarterbacks in an.
He was only projected by ESPN. He wasn't projected by the scouts. ESPN created the narrative, specifically Stephen A. Smith and racist Ryan Clark. And now that nobody believed that narrative, the world needs to stop and the world's going to explode and everything needs to change and everybody's racist.
NFL draft end up having 5 quarterbacks picked ahead of them and falling to the number 144th overall pick. That has Deion written all over it because that's a bit.
Wow, he just keeps incriminating himself. Yeah, it does have Deion written all over it. You know why? Because Shedeur listened to his dad, how to handle the interviews the way Deion used to handle them, and that worked for Deion because he had that type of elite talent. His kid listened to him, and it cost him $20 to $50 million. Yeah, it does have. You know what, Stephen A. Smith? For once, I'm going to agree with you. That's right. It has Deion Sanders all over it. You're right.
Excessive. Under any other conditions, we would view it differently. If Shedeur had gone in late in the first round, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If he had gone in the second round, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But when it came to third, fourth, and fifth
We have
round,
to wrap it up,
and
I think.
by the way, you saw the Browns pick somebody before they picked him. You found yourself saying, "This is excessive." They're sending
Dylan Gabriel's college. He played better competition, elite competition, and he had a better college resume. So do you even watch the game, Stephen A. Smith? Have you even watched all 22 film of Shedeur Sanders? Do you even know what that is? Probably not. And he keeps acting like the NFL owes Shedeur something. See, this is the attitude that got Shedeur in trouble in the first place. Had acted like they were doing the NFL a favor by letting NFL teams draft his son. This is the same attitude that Stephen A. Smith has. He's acting like the NFL owed them something, and the Sanders family's doing NFL teams a favor.
And that is where we get to look at them with a skeptical eye more so
go ahead.
than we look at Deion
Clown.
or Shedeur.
Yeah. Here's the silver lining. The story isn't written, right? Look at Tom Brady. Sometimes you have that chip on your shoulder and it just propels your career. Still not fair what he went through, but
The insufferable woman, Molly Quirm, it's still not fair. Well, Molly, you should blame Deion and Shedeur for their behavior and what the things that they were saying. But hey, we can't do that. Of course we can't.
it's just the start.
Stephen A. Smith is just a total clown. He has no credibility whatsoever. If you pay attention to him and you watch him all the time and you see how he constantly flip-flops and he makes everything racial and nothing is ever Deion's fault or Shedeur's fault, he's an absolute joke and a disgrace. Thanks for tuning in to Unbreakable with Chris Chamasairos.